All right, let's get started. Love to hear about all of those family day long weekend activities that you have planned. Because I live in such a small community, we do family day well over here in the North Shuswap. We have bed races where people decorate beds like floats, and then we have races and we have chili cook-offs and all sorts of fun things. So I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so if you have not been to a Poppy workshop before, you're in for a treat of afternoon of interactivity. I'm Jen Kelly. I'm a teacher consultant here with Poppy, and I have Calico here with me as well.
Hey,
So
everybody.
Calico, thanks Calico for being here. She's going to be here for the first little bit of the presentation to make sure everything is going smoothly, and then she has to pop off because she is presenting live in her school district in ST47 Paul River. So she's, what are you presenting on, Calico?
I'm doing vocabulary instruction in
Oh, yay!
classrooms K-8. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Wonderful. Oh, that's great news. Okay, well, lucky teachers that you'll be with this afternoon. Calico presented this morning with Lisa, so she is having a full day. So, if you didn't have a chance to pick up our handouts or anything, Calico just put that link into the chat box. We have all of our handouts, and then anything that we're referring to throughout the presentation that is linkable, we have linked into that page. So, oh, she just put it in there again. Thanks so much, Calico. Okay, so this afternoon we're going to be focusing on writing and building our students' identity as growing writers. So I would like to begin by acknowledging that I live, work, learn, and play on the traditional, ancestral, unceded Secwepemc territories. I also acknowledge that for many years, the Secwepemc peoples have walked gently on this traditional territory. I am a settler on this land, and I benefit from years of the colonial system. Our challenge as settlers, and most importantly as educators, is to work actively to decolonize these systems. So today we are really going to focus in on instructional practices, strategies, and routines to support our young writers, both in how they become a writer by identity and also some of the skills that they need. I think we know as primary teachers that it is not all about having all of the skills, but the important part that we need to create an environment for is to have that classroom of writers where students see themselves as writers, are excited about writing, and are writing for authentic purposes. And that is all about teaching the writer, not the writing. All of our students are different. They have different interests. They have different skill sets. They have different ways that they want to write. So we want to invite all of that uniqueness into our classrooms. Okay, so first let's take a quick look at what writing looks like as we take a deep dive into our curriculum. So there is a lot of writing that happens in our kindergarten classrooms. We have our kindergarten students exchanging ideas and perspectives. Using language is a big part of the writing process in kindergarten. They are creating stories, getting an idea of what a story is, how stories impact themselves, their family, their community. Um, and and kindergarten is a lot of experimenting with print and storytelling so that they gain that identity as writers, and also so that any approximation of writing that they're doing in our classrooms is honored and strengthened by our encouragement to get pens on paper, markers on paper, try things out, um, so that they can see that they, even if whatever place they are in the writing continuum, they are writers and their writing is valued. So we also really focus in on reading back writing, listening to writing, connecting that reading and writing are connected through the alphabetic insight, and we want our students to recognize the importance of story because story is all about being human. So the first things that our students want to tell us is stories about themselves, about their families, about their community, and we can really make that connection very concrete to storytelling and story writing. Okay, so in grade one, our students are doing a lot of imaginative writing. Often these are modeled on different books that they've read, heard, or viewed. So we can bring that out with our students by really discussing events and characters, problem solutions, making that sense of story really concrete for our students so that they get used to um, retelling is a wonderful comprehension strategy and dramatizing stories and writing familiar stories. In grade two, we want to continue our students' joy of personal writing. So, writing about what they like, what they dislike, their connections. And we can also bring in a lot of informational writing at this point so that our students know that they have important ideas to share and that needs to get out into the world to share. Again, we're really working on literary writing at this time so that our students can model what they've read, heard, and viewed. And this could be at even a more complex level so that we're really noticing those nuggets from our mentor texts and our read alouds and how other authors, other published authors, other authors in the classroom, so student authors and ourselves as authors, are using different techniques to engage our audience and share our stories with others. In grade three, we want to have our students writing about their experiences, how they experienced field trips, how they experienced um, uh, a walk about the school grounds or in the forest. We also really want to have a lot of easy to follow informational writing and representations for our students. So this could even be like bringing in some mentor texts like Highlights magazine, where it's short, small bursts of informational writing. That's a really great one to use in the classroom. And we can have continue with our literary writing where we can have even more complex texts, different kinds of literature, different genres, exposing our students to a lot of different ways that they can enjoy text and try out writing in different ways. Okay, so what we know about writing development, we know that our children need explicit and sequenced instruction that helps them progress along a learning continuum. That is why writing is so naturally differentiated because all of our students are going to be at different places in their writing continuum, in the learning continuum. So we can provide that really important next step for them so that they can really clearly see how to continue that progression. We can provide that critical feedback that helps them know those next steps. And by critical, I don't mean anything negative. I mean very explicit and concrete at just the right moment that is going to help them move forward. And we want to have lots and lots of opportunities for our children to write about topics they care about. Because what better way to engage them as a writer than to invite them to write about what they care about? And we'll talk more about that throughout the afternoon. So, on that note, what topics do you care about? What do you love to write about? I think another wonderful way for us to invite our students into a writing community where they see themselves as writers is to show ourselves as writers so that they get to see that um, I write, Calico writes, Eric Carle writes, Robert Munch writes. We're all writers. We're all in this together, and we want to invite them in there. But one of the things that we want to write makes us better writers and write more is when we get to write about what we really like, what are our favorite topics to write about. So I'll give you a moment to think about that and pop it into the chat box. What do you love to write about? What do you care about? What are your favorite topics? And you can pop those into the chat box. Oh, wonderful. I'm just looking at the chat box. I hope you have the chat box open so you can see everyone's wonderful responses here. But I, as I was reading these, I was like, oh, I'd love to hear more about the recipes and about the positive affirmations and poetry and gardening. Many of you mentioned gardening. If we were all together, wouldn't it be so fun to just do some writing and then swap it out and see everyone's passions written down? Of course, we can't because we're virtual, but what a great idea. Have some writing, on the side that you love to write about. So hold on to that little nugget that we just talked about, because we're going to come back to it in the second half of our after the break this afternoon. But thank you so much for engaging in that. Okay, so nurturing and supporting young writers. So what do we need to really introduce and invite our students into the place where they are honored for their writing and they want to continue to do so? So, writing is one of those things that works really well when it's predictable and it's not an an add-on activity. So it's not we have 10 minutes, let's pull out our writing books. But if it's predictable and it's routine, then our students get a sense that it's very valued. And also, as a really great benefit, we come up with things to write about all the time, not just on the spot, but as we're playing, as we're out for a walk, or we notice something really interesting during a talk with a friend or something like that. So, if our students get the idea that writing is a predictable daily routine, then they can start to look out for those little nuggets that they want to write about. And it would be helpful then, oh, yeah, okay, well, I'm having writing time tomorrow, so I can definitely have some writing about this specific thing that I want to write about. It's also wonderful for our students to get a sense that not all writers are the same. So we talk about Eric Carle's writing and Todd Parr's writing and how they're different and how they're similar. So they get to see that they can create their own writing identity for who they are and what they like to write about. And it's a process of decision making and action. So I'll describe this a little bit more when I go into bookmaking, how I've really made the decision making process the central point of some of the work that we do around writing. But I want to highlight the risk taking aspect of writing. It's different from reading because when we're reading, we're internalizing a lot. When we're writing, we're putting ourselves out into the world. We're saying, this is what's important to me. This is who I am as my unique person. This is something that happened to me that I want to share with others. That can be like a huge risk-taking activity for adults, for children, for whomever. And we we need to acknowledge that with our students. And the more that we are putting our writing out there and highlighting other students' writing, I think that that will start to, well, I know that that will start to diminish that risky part of the writing process and know that they are in a safe place to share with the world. The other side of risk taking is when we do put ourselves out into the world, how empowering is that? When we know that we are putting our thoughts, our stories, who we are out into the world for other people to read, it's a very empowering process. So that's kind of a double-sided thing. There's risks, but there's also empowerment. Okay, we need our students to have a sense of where they are going with their writing. That's why we use a lot of mentor text in our classroom so that they can see where they can grow, what they need. Um, a lot of great questions when we're conferring with our students is tell me about your writing and where you've grown with it or something new you've tried. So we're wanting our students' voice in that. So we can also get a sense of what kind of writers write in different kinds of ways. So that's the craft of writing. So we want to get a sense of the different ways that we can get ourselves out into the world through writing. And most Teachers must act as if children are capable, competent writers. So we're going to talk a lot about that this afternoon as well, because they are capable, competent writers wherever they are in the writing continuum. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bookmaking. So a lot of the ideas that I've got about bookmaking are from the book listed on the bottom here, A Teacher's Guide to Getting Started with Beginner Writers from Katie Wood-Ray and Lisa Cleveland. Also, Matt Glover, Carl Anderson have a lot of books on bookmaking as well. We'll be referring to throughout this afternoon. But if you're looking for some fabulous books that are great guides for us as teachers, that's definitely one of them. How to Be a Better Writing Teacher from Carl Anderson and Matt Glover is another really great one. So, bookmaking brings a sense of play into the work of writing. Students are generally very, very engaged with bookmaking. And Calico, I might have you unmute for a moment, and if you could share the story that you shared with me a couple days ago about the class that you were in and what happened when you came to the bookmaking part of the day.
Sure. Yeah, it was in a kindergarten classroom, and we were introducing bookmaking into the class. And of course, the dynamic of this classroom will probably sound quite familiar. It was busy. They were very active. There was some identified behavior issues in the classroom. There was just the whole range, and it was a busy place, like I'm sure a lot of you experience in your own classrooms. And we introduced bookmaking. We gave the beginning lesson modeled right from the Getting Started with Beginning Writers, Lisa Cleveland's intro lesson. And we looked around the classroom, and sure enough, every single student was at a table or a spot in the classroom, and they were engaged in making a book. And the teacher sort of looked at me, and it was a really positive experience. And I can say that that has happened in more than just that classroom in my experience in K1 too, when I have introduced this with teachers without fail, actually. You look around the classroom and kids are doing the work of writing. So it's really powerful to see. And when you jump in and have a go, I would love to hear, or we would love to hear if you have the same experience at the end of this session. Thanks for inviting
Definitely.
me to
Thanks so
speak
much,
about that, Jen.
Calico.
Yeah, feels.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Okay, so that engagement factor is really, really high. And we're going to talk a little bit more about engagement, but um, bookmaking is accessible for everyone of all skill abilities. So um, it's not intimidating for our students to just jump in and give it a try, especially when we show them other students' textbooks that they have made. So they get to see, oh, okay, well, I could do that. That's, pretty interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about sharing students' work, but getting our students to live like writers. That's really what our point is with bookmaking. They're going to understand the process of composition and decision making. And I'll talk again a little bit more about that in a moment. And it also helps our children to start to understand that there's different genres, that there's different purposes for writing, and that we can write to different audiences. So when we're looking at bookmaking, there's a few things that we want to make sure that we have on hand and that we're thinking about ahead of time. First is time. So Calico mentioned their students were really engaged, and that's what I've noticed when I've taught bookmaking as well, whether it's in a grade one classroom, kindergarten classroom. Um, they want more time. So if you're thinking about introducing bookmaking, make sure that you have the time to do it, which means that you'd have time for some modeling, some demonstrations, some student writing, and then some celebration time as well. And that's a really important part because we want to give our students that sense of flow and enjoy the process of writing. The worst thing that we could do is introduce it and then stop it really quickly because that's not showing like how real writing works. Like generally when we as adults sit down to write, we need a lot of time to get into it as well. So we want to have some space where our students can be a writer and whether that whatever you're comfortable with in your classroom, whether it's at tables, whether it's on clipboards around the classroom. So think about the space where children are going to be successful with their writing. It might even be that they start out at their tables or their desks, and you could say, you know, next time or the time after that, maybe you'll get a chance to choose where you would work best as a writer. Blank books are really important in the bookmaking process because many of our youngest students are going to struggle with writing on lines, and that's going to take a lot of their time and their energy. So lines are setting an expectation um, that it has to be neat and um, on the line and letters all formed correctly, and that might just shut down some of our students that say, I don't know how to do that, so I can't. So having blank books is an invitational way that we're naturally differentiating for our students. Now, that doesn't mean there could be a student that is really interested in writing on lines. Great. They can make that choice. I will go over and I will help that child write lines, or they can, grab a ruler if they want and do it themselves. But that's one of the individual ways that we can support all of our children. We want to have a variety of different writing tools. Um, a lot of our students to write at the youngest levels for writing with a pencil is very cumbersome, but it might be a lot easier for them to write with markers. So we want to again be invitational and differentiate for our students. The student who grabs a pencil and wants to write in a pencil, absolutely great. But we want to have a variety of materials so that we can meet all of our students' needs. And then we want to have an image of bookmaking. We want our students to know what a book looks like and that people make books and that they are going to make a book. So, an important part of bookmaking is that it's multiple pages stapled together because books aren't all one page generally. We want a sense of turning pages, of having a story over multiple pages. We want to have a sense that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is really important for our students to get when they're um, when they're beginning the writing process. So having blank pages stapled together that has a cover and an inside, wonderful. Um, very, very important. So the bottom line here is that if children aren't trying to write, they aren't learning how to write. They have to actually be doing the action of writing in order to get better at it. So it's not enough for me to, like, if you were in the session this morning with Calico and Lisa said it's not enough for me to watch a YouTube video about how to paddleboard. I actually have to go out there and do it. And that's the same with writing. We need our students to actually be writers and not just talking about it. And this bookmaking allows lots of time for our students to find their voice in their writing and try out different things and experiment. Okay, so what does this actually look like? So I'll describe how I've been often introducing bookmaking in different classrooms. Generally, at that first like 10 minutes of the writers' meeting, the whole class, very important time to set up some modeling and describing what we're going to be doing as learners. So often I do this in a very similar way to what Katie Woodbury and Lisa Cleveland do in the book that I'm referring to, is I say, I'm going to introduce one of my favorite books to you today. And this book, and I'll hold up a book such as The Very Hungry Caterpillar. A lot of them say, oh, I know that book, I know that book. And that's great. Wonderful. We can read books over and over again and always get different things out of them. So I say, this is a book written by Eric Carle. And I show a picture, a photograph of Eric Carle, so that they get to know he's a real person. Like the people who write books are real. And I said, so Eric Carle made a lot of decisions when he was writing this book. Let's read the book, enjoy it, and then we'll talk about some of the decisions that he made. So I read through it, they're loving it, and then I just ask the children in front of me, whether they're kindergarten, grade one, grade two, um, what are the decisions that Eric Carle made? And they'll say, oh, he decided to have the caterpillar turn into a butterfly at the end of the story. He decided to have lots of different food choices. So he decided what food he wanted the caterpillar to eat, all of those different things. And then I want to share with you another one of my friend's writings, and I'll bring up a student example writing. And I'll say, let's look at Elba's writing here. Elba wrote a story about cats because I think she probably really loves cats. She has a lot of information about cats. Let's look at what decisions Elba made to write this story about cats. So I'll read them. Student language, it's, you know, not looking professional. There's words that are misspelt. There's words that are written all together without spaces. There's pictures. There's crossouts and restarts, and there's lots of different things in this piece of writing. And I'll point those out as I go through. Oh, she just decided to start a little a different way here, so she put a line through that and continues to write on the rest of the page. So um, then I would say, now you're going to make a book today. You're going to make a book like Eric Carle did and like our friend Elba did, and invite them into that process. I wonder what decisions that you will make when you write this book, sorry, make this book. Try to use intentionally the word make rather than write. And I'm getting into that later on the presentation. But if I say we're all going to write a book, what do you think I hear from my kindergarten students? But I don't know how to write. But if I use the language make a book, we're all going to make a book, then they get an idea that it's the same as creating a building during um, building time, or they're creating a sandcastle, they're making something, and it's really invitational language. Okay, so once I have them all super, super excited about their writing, and I'm given them each the stapled together books, then they're going to try out their writing. I'm going to invite them to tell myself or someone else what the topic they're going to write about, and then that is when I'm doing a lot of conferring in the classroom. And I'm leading with, what decisions are you making about your writing today? So that they get the idea that they're in charge of their book, right? Book making, sorry. When we come back, so that's their independent work there. When we come back together as a whole class, I'm not asking necessarily for all my students to read out their writing, but I am asking them to share one decision that they made when they were making their book today. Share one decision. Um, I also really emphasize that writing is not a one-day deal, that Eric Carle did not write The Hungry Caterpillar in one day, that Elba, my friend here who's wrote about cats, she didn't write that in one day. It took many days to go back to the story, to add to it until the author felt that they were done. So writing takes many days. Okay, let's take a look at this short video from Lisa Cleveland that I was just mentioning, and how she introduces bookmaking throughout the year. So you could see that those children were engaged, and it wasn't just a one-time deal, that they got used to writing, bookmaking being a routine in the classroom that they could count on, continue to build on, that they had lots of stories that they wanted, experiences that they wanted to share with others. So I'm going to give you another example here. Oh, no, not quite yet. Let's talk a little bit about engagement. This is the perfect time because we just saw a video of students being incredibly engaged. Calico shared that experience with her. I would have to echo that as well, that I have seen a lot of very, very engaged children. during the bookmaking process. So Ellen Keane talks a lot about different kinds of engagement that we can foster in our children. So engagement in this isn't something that we can uh, make our children be engaged, but we can invite them and we can set up different ways to share engagement with them. We can set up what engagement looks like so that we can invite them into that place. But we can't say, now you have to be engaged, because that is a personal choice of our children. So let's take a look at four pillars of engagement that Keene talks about. First, we have intellectual urgency. I have to know more. I think we've all been there when we start to learn something and we're like, oh, I just have to continue to learn. The power of all of the tools that are at our fingertips these days to learn more about different things. Emotional resonance. I'm into this with all my heart and soul, all my heart and mind. Perspective bending. Other learners affect my thinking, and I can affect theirs too. That's an interesting one, especially for our younger learners. And then the aesthetic world. This is so cool. I feel like it was made for me. So we can talk about engagement in those ways with our children. One way that we can talk about engagement is talking about ourselves as an engaged writer. So we want our students to be engaged in activity in the writing. We do not just want compliance. We want engagement because that's where we're going to really, that's where our students are really going to learn. They're going to push themselves. They're going to get into that flow zone where they can continue. So one of the ways that we can do that is talk about a time when we were really engaged with our writing. So sometimes in a classroom, I might say, oh, I was going for a walk yesterday and I just noticed so much beauty around this changing of seasons from winter to spring. And I just decided to write some poetry about it. I might share with them the poem that I wrote, or I might just talk about it. I might say, you know what? I was so happy when I was writing that poem that I didn't even think about like what time it was or that I needed to start getting dinner ready. I just wanted to keep going. I might say something like, um, I just kept thinking about my poem, about that beautiful nature. I wanted to get back to it so quickly. I just kept thinking about it throughout the day. I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm so excited to get back to it. And then I could ask them, what did engagement look like for me as a writer? And have them put those feelings and those noticings back on me. We can talk about it. Is there ever a time that you have felt engaged? Maybe it's been playing sports, maybe it has been in some of your writing. So that's a wonderful way to invite our students into what it feels like to be engaged. We can also help our students identify how to engage an audience by asking them, who's going to read your writing? Who are you writing for? Who do you want to share your writing with? They may say, oh, well, you read my writing. Yes, as your teacher, I read your writing. Do you share your writing with anyone else? Well, I like to share it with my mom when I get home. I like to share it with my friend. So the fact that they are writing for a purpose is going to allow for further engagement. And then we can also teach our students to choose an engaging genre. So maybe poetry is not the way that that they feel passionate about. Maybe they're very passionate about writing graphic novels, or maybe they're very passionate about um, explaining how to do things. So a how-to text. But the fact that there are so many different ways to engage our students in different avenues, um, let's talk about it. Let's talk about that with our students, and so they have an idea of what engage means, that concept. Okay. Oh yes, our enthusiasm for writing is contagious. Spread it to your students and see them flourish. I'm going to show a video later on in the presentation that you'll see how enthusiasm for writing is contagious with our students. Another way that we can that basically invite another teacher into the room is to have mentor text. Basically, a mentor text is another teacher. I don't have to have all the knowledge, all of the ways, the skills, the different ways that we write, but I can bring in mentor texts that show students how different authors use different crafts or different ways to craft their writing. Um, this is important because we look to mentor texts all the time. When we have to write in a different way, if I'm writing real estate ad and I've never written one before, the first thing that going to do is look at other real estate ads and get an idea. How long are they? What kind of words do they mention? What's important to put in a real estate ad? Um, if I'm starting a blog, I'm going to look at other blogs. How long are blogs usually? Um, what's engaging about like how do I write an attractive sentence or title that's going to grab an audience? So I'm always going to different kinds of text to find out how they are written, what I can learn about them. And that's what we can do with our students with different mentor texts in their classrooms. We're basically allowing our mentor texts to help teach writing descriptively instead of prescriptively. So we're actually showing and open a text and say, well, isn't it interesting how Leona Prince used this way to share her knowledge with other people? What do you notice about her text? So a lot of inquiry learning. We're showing how to write instead of just telling. And a very important question, I was trying to think of this one earlier when I was talking about something about what are you doing as a writer to make your writing better? Fabulous question that works for all of our students, regardless of their ability and where they are in the writing continuum. What are you doing as a writer to make your writing better? Okay, in the book written by Carl Anderson and Matt Glover that I referenced earlier, How to Be a Better Writing Teacher, they talk about an immersion phase. So if you're introducing a new genre or a new way, a new craft for students to write, so maybe you're doing a lot of focus learning on using punctuation or dialogue bubbles or specifically a genre. So what they suggest in the book is that you take an immersion phase to at the beginning of introducing a unit so that the students get a really good front loading experience about whatever it is that we're going to be focusing in on for the next couple of weeks. So they suggest taking 2 to 4 days, probably more like two in a lot of our classrooms, at the beginning of the unit to really study a stack of mentor texts, like maybe like 4 or 5 mentor texts that all have something in common, whether it's use of dialogue bubbles, whether it's use of interesting punctuation, or whether it's a specific genre like how-to books, whatever it is. So during that immersion phase, first, we're just going to get our students to notice what it is that the similarities are amongst these books. So we want our students to notice what the author is doing with their writing that is similar to the other books that we have. We can do this definitely we want to preload our students with these ideas so that when we're in the work of actually making books and writing, we don't have to read whole books because that's going to take a lot of our time away from the students actually having the time to write. But if we take some specific time at the beginning, then I can bring back a book and say, oh, yes, remember how Leona Prince did this on this page of her book. And my students go, oh, okay, yeah, right, I remember that. That's it. That's the mentor text, that's the teaching point. It's time saving. And our students become better at reading like a writer over time. So the more that they're used to this kind of introduction into writing, they're going to start to read like a writer. So, oh, wow, that's really interesting how that author, used perspective taking throughout this book. That's something I might want to try in my writing. Okay, so what does this look like? The structure of an immersion phase is generally that we want to read through all of the texts for enjoyment and sense of story. Of course, we're primary teachers. We love inviting students into the world of books. And then we can do some noticing as a whole group. We might put them into partners to notice. But basically, we're doing some noticing about what it is our teaching point is. And we're doing a lot of modeling through this immersion phase. So I might say, oh, I really like how this author, how Robert Munch decided to use humor in his books. I think I'm going to try that out for myself and see how it works for me. They're doing tons of modeling and noticing here. We are inviting our students into the process of noticing. So it's basically an inquiry approach to writing. What else do we notice about all of these books? And where do we notice it? Oh, we notice it really clearly on this page. Excellent. Let's think about that as we move forward. So mentor texts are an extra teacher in the classroom, and they offer very concrete ways of showing our students how to write. So I've been talking a little bit about Leona Prince. I recently got to have lunch with her a few times when I was working in Burns Lake, so I have to just share her beautiful story with you. It's very popular across British Columbia, but Leona Prince is in the Indigenous Education Department in Nechako Lakes. So enjoy this. Think about what you notice about her writing and feel free to pop that into the chat box. What a beautiful, beautiful book. I can't get over the message and the artwork and oh my goodness, so lovely. So we have in the chat box that it was informational, that there was repetition, that it followed like a cycle way of writing where we're or thinking about the world. Yeah, that circular story. Thanks, Maria. So we have so many wonderful things that our students could replicate and try out and notice how so many of our aspects are interrelated, interconnected. Love it. So you can do a lot with that story, definitely, and you can use it as a mentor text. So to talk about what was the inspiration, what did Leona and Gabrielle Prince really want the author to get out of this story and to see with this story. Okay, let's look at another. So we've now had a published book that we were noticing. Now I'm going to share some student work with you because again, the more that we have published books, student work, student writing, and our own writing as mentor texts in the classroom, the more invitational the more invitational it will be, and it will create that sense of a writing community. Published books, children's texts, and teacher texts are all valued, and we can learn from all of them. That is a child that is a decision maker. She knew exactly what decisions that she was making, and um, how to voice that and definitely could see her identity as a writer come through. I made a decision here. I was thinking this. This is what I did. Even when she was talking about the song that she was writing with her friend, oh, I can't add to it because we decided to do that together. So she's definitely someone that is very purposeful about her writing. You could even see when she started to talk about her process and her writing, her voice was elevated and she was even starting to like move her body. She was wiggly a little bit, like with excitement. That's what we want our students to be. So with another grade one student that I was working with, actually this was a class, Becky Watt's class up in the Nechako Lake School District. We did some bookmaking together. She has a K-1 too. Bookmaking was perfect because it's naturally differentiated. When the students were actually writing their books, I had no idea who was a K, who was a 1, and who was a 2 because they'd all brought such strength to their work and it was not evident. Um, so the natural differentiation of making books is a lovely add-on to the way that we work in multi-age classrooms. So this young one wanted to write about trampolines. He was very interested in trampolines. It was his topic, and he was going to be writing about it. So as I go through this one's book, be thinking, what are the strengths of this writer? What can he do? And you can pop those into the chat box. Trampolines are bouncy. Trampolines are fun. Trampolines can be full of letters or no, leaves or pine needles if there are trees nearby. I make the rules of my trampoline, and my rules are to have fun. I ran out of the house to go to the trampoline. Okay, so first of all, what do you notice about the student's writing? What can this student do? Pop it into the chat box. Speech bubbles, absolutely. Variety of sentence lengths, uses linking words. Fabulous. Start sentences in different ways. Exclamation mark. Lots of good ideas about trampolines. Yeah, he definitely knew a lot about trampolines, right? So staying on topic through the story, um, adding in the information that he knows, the background knowledge. Lots correct spelling, yeah, and a lots of correct sounding. If it wasn't spelled absolutely correctly, it was a very close approximation. Conventional spelling with some sight words, finger spaces, absolutely. I'm just going to, I realize that my battery is quite low on my laptop. I'm gonna switch it out. It might change my camera for a little bit. So don't worry, I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, sorry about that. Just one moment. Okay, sorry. It just changed the camera that I was using to my laptop one, but I couldn't have both of them hooked up at the same time. So sorry. I'm still here and I'll figure it out over the break. But I didn't want to lose you. Okay, so what would a next step for this child be, do you think? We have printing goes from left to right, absolutely. What would be a next like small nudge? Some periods, absolutely. Any other ideas? Descriptive words, for sure. Thanks, Leanne. Lots of great ideas there for sure. He started to explore with speech bubbles, so maybe that's something that you could like nudge a little further. Use of connecting words, definitely. Okay, we're going to take a look at another student's writing. Oh, and just I'll point out right before we do, the only way we can find out what the student's next step is if we can find out what he can do on his own. So that's the beauty of um, stepping back a little bit, being a guide on the side, asking those really important questions of our students, but not doing the writing for them. So we want to know what our students can do on their own so that we can give them those appropriate next steps. Okay, Let's take a look at this grade 2 student. How to clean. Do you want to make your parents happy? Read this book right now. First, you need, oh, again, what does the student know about writing? What are their strengths? First, you need a spray bottle and a towel and a mess. There's some labeling going on. Next, sorry, I usually have this on the big screen. Next, you push the litter on the wall and then you wipe up the towel on the wall where you sprayed the spray. Then pick the things off the ground and put the things where they are supposed to go. After that, vacuum the floor, vacuum even under your bed. Finally, show your parents and keep on cleaning. Parents do look very happy, don't they? Okay, so with this one, what are her strengths as a writer? So we have using connecting words, transition words, using periods. Absolutely. I wonder what kind of mentor text that she had available for the how to notice like this and then this and then this. I loved her opening page, which was if you want to make your parents happy, read this book right now. So a hook to hook the reader in, a purpose. She had great ideas, invented spelling for sure. Okay, what would be a next small nudge, do you think? What would you teach her during a conference? Oh, yeah, she had a really good, she had voice, right? Because she was speaking to her readers with the word you, an invitational voice to be a journey in her book. Any other small nudges that you would think of there? Oh, yeah, thank you. Letters, uppercase, lowercase, definitely. Okay, if you think of anything else, just pop it into the chat box. Oh, use a question mark when writing a question. Definitely. Because she's got a lot of that, like the use of periods. So it would be a great just next step for her to have control of those question marks. Okay, so in the second half today, we are going to look at some structures in place for what our writing time can look like in our classrooms. And first, I'm going to talk a little bit about Writer's Workshop. So, Writer's Workshop is a place where children's first writing will be celebrated with all its glorious approximation. So, I think you've heard that message over and over again this afternoon is that our students are all at different parts of the continuum and all writing when whether whatever their writing looks like, they are putting marker to paper and um, and trying it out wherever they are. So we're honoring all of those approximations. Okay, so let's take a look at the structure of writing workshop, what it can look like. Just right before we look at the specific structure, our goals for a writing workshop are really to build that safe writing community. So we've already talked about the necessity of having a routine that our students get to know and that they are familiar with the fact that writing is a continuous process, that they will have lots of time to write in the classroom. We can establish some rituals and routines around that writer's workshop, whether that is materials used, um, where writing workshop takes place in the classroom, what it involves in terms of partner talk, all of those different things. But we want our students to be doing a lot of thinking, talking, and writing. And a huge part about writing is having that time beforehand to think of ideas, to plan things out in our mind before we're actually doing the act of writing. So talk is an incredibly, incredibly important part of the writing process. Even giving um, workshops to teachers. I hardly ever say, okay, write on command, because we need that talk time. We need some time to think about what it is that we want to write about, what some ideas that we have. And as adults, we need that. If someone told me to write on command, I think I would probably look like a deer in the headlights. So I want to give that, I want to honor that with our students as well, that there's a lot of thinking and talking that goes into writing. And we want to make sure that our students have an understanding that writing isn't just about the words on the page, but it's about having detail in our pictures and our words, that there's like structure in place. There's a lot of different things that go into writing, which is why we spend so much time teaching it. So you and your students first enjoy and respond to literature as readers, and then later come back to the text as writers. So again, going back to that idea that Matt and Carl had around the immersion phase, we want to enjoy looking at mentor texts as writers, or sorry, as readers, and enjoying that, and then noticing different aspects of it and coming back and looking at that same text as writers. So, a possible flow of a writing workshop is to begin with a whole class mini lesson. So, the value of having a whole class is that we are doing a lot of modeling. It's more of the teacher. um, I'm doing a lot of the modeling. I'm focusing on a skill or a strategy. And in terms of time wise, I'm reaching all of my students at the same for a very short period of time, and then I'm coming back to them, noticing what students need extra special practice or modeling or next steps during the rest of the writer's workshop. So mini lesson, we're going to see an example of that in a moment, but it's very focused on a skill or strategy. It's a short time frame because we want to get our students to the active writing. That's one of the reasons why we want to have that immersion phase, so that we can quickly bring up a book and say, oh yes, remember when Eric Carle did that on this page? Okay, let's look at that strategy that he used or the skill that he did and practice it out together in our time together. Then we want our students to have some time where they are either with us in small groups, where where they're practicing their writing, they're getting into their writing, and we're doing conferences with students. So we're really, our students are in the independent practice time, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're working independently and that it is silent. It's generally not silent during independent practice time because our students are talking things through with peers or with myself or with a small group. Um, they might be working in a group doing some collaborative writing, like the girl that we saw in the video earlier. So in my classrooms, anyways, that I've been working in, it's not necessarily a silent time. There's a lot going on during that time. And then we can come back together and really share, celebrate, connect back to what the focus was for the mini lesson. So just like at the beginning of today's workshop, when I mentioned how I usually introduce bookmaking to my students by sharing with them a book by Eric Carle and the decisions that he made as a writer, book by a student, the decisions that she made as a writer, I'm bringing that back during the celebration time at the end to talk about my students and what decisions they made as a writer. Okay, so generally, if we break down that mini lesson even further into really bite-sized pieces, we want a connection. So what have we been working on in our class in writing? A specific, very specific teaching focus, because again, I'm just wanting to focus in on one aspect of the writing so that it's quick and they can get to the writing themselves. And then we can try and play with that a little bit through the active engagement. So I'm going to provide my students with a little bit of guided practice. I might say something like, if my teaching point was on the descriptive word choice in this mentor text, I might put it back onto the students. So if you're trying to write in a descriptive way in your class, in your books, what could you use to describe, and I might hold up an object. So what are some descriptive words that you might use to describe this? So they have a little bit of practice time. Turn to your elbow partner and talk it through. What's some description words? And then, of course, we want to send them out with with a directive. So in your writing time today, I'd like you to focus on adding in some description words, descriptive words that is going to make your writing even more engaging for your audience. Okay, let's take a look at what this can look like in action. So this is just the mini lesson part of a teaching cycle or of a writing workshop. Sorry, it's Friday afternoon, isn't it? Oh, what wonderful stories you were mentioning in the chat box. All of those sound like they would be riveting for you to tell to your students and then do some writing with and have those as mentor text as you share them with students. Oh my goodness. So great. Oh, you came on the scene for 3 months and you found her. Oh, that's amazing, Suzanne. Oh, cool. Okay, tons and tons of really good stories. I just invite you to share them with your students. They will absolutely love them. I promise. Okay, so when I was working on some writing with a grade 2 class in Smithers, I was co-teaching with in Rachel Eller's class with her, and she had this poster, "We are writers," and lists the different kind of writing that our students might be at different places. Now, this was a grade 2 class and it was very varied in abilities, absolutely. But she had been working with students in this way that there can be curly writing, there can be letter writing, there can be sound writing, and there could be book writing. This is how one speech language pathologist who was in the room with us decided to use this anchor chart that I thought was very brilliant. So I wanted to share with you. So she was working with a student, and the student asked her to spell a word for him. Very common, right? Now, Audrey was her name. Audrey thought she knew the student very well, and she knew that the correct spelling of this particular word was way outside of his zone of proximal development. So her giving him the word would not really accomplish a lot of learning at that point. So she said to him, that's a really important word for your story. Do you want to write it with curly writing or letter writing or sound writing? So I'm not going to write for you, but what kind of writing do you want to use when you're working with how do you want to write this word? She knew it was so important to him, to his story, that he wasn't going to forget what it was, but that it's honoring that place of some of the words might be words that we can spell with book writing, and some of them might be words that we cannot, that we are going to use other kind of writing, like curly writing, and making that decision as an author, right? So he responded with, "Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know how to start spelling that, so I'm going to spell that word with curly writing and then move on." And it was just a beautiful moment to honor approximations for our students and not take over the writing process. She could have spelt it correctly for him. I think the word was, hmm, I can't even remember, but it was a long multisyllabic word. Um, she could have done that, but this was empowering way for her to work with this student. If she had spelled the word for him, he probably wouldn't be able to read it back. So what's the difference between that and curly writing at this point? Okay, love that. Excuse me, sorry. So what does honoring approximations look like? It looks like taking a child's writing and seeing all that they can do, not what they can't. That's what we've been really focused on this afternoon. Absolutely. And it looks like believing that our young kids are writers and not doing the writing for them, with the example that I just shared with you. And it also looks like us as teachers, as adults, feeling comfortable with children's approximations so that children can also feel comfortable. And that might be a really important conversation that you have with the parents of the children in your classroom as well. Because I've had a lot of parents come back to me to say, oh, I went through his weekly letter to me and had him correct all the spelling or corrected the spelling for him. So we want our parents to know a little bit more about the writing continuum if they don't, and to know that we are okay with approximating with those approximations and that we're building on that. Okay, so let's create some purpose. Writing time as purposeful and important as other times in our classrooms. We know that center time is about exploration and play. We know recess time is about being outside, running, exploring, having fun, chatting with friends. And we know that writing workshop is about making books. So just adding in that purpose so that they know that there is a direct purpose, that there's an intention behind this time, just like there is at recess time, a very important part of our day. And there's a picture of Eric Carl. So we can get the big idea that writing workshop is a time every day when we make books. This is a purposeful time of our day, just like we talked about. We can talk about the other authors that we bring into the classroom, whether we read books, whether it's Eric Carle, whether it's myself as an author, as a teacher, whether it is Alba as a author. So we're all authors. We all have different ways that we're working together. I can say, oh, I'm an author just like Eric Carle because I made the decisions to add, something really exciting at the end of my story. Okay, so another big idea, people make books by drawing the pictures and writing the words. So we can talk a lot about the tools that we have available. What tools do we have available to write? What tools do we have available to illustrate? We can share photographs of other children making books. This is what it looks like to make books in our classroom. This is that the student in the photograph is deciding to use a pencil. That's the decision of this student. We might have other students that decide to use markers in different ways. And we can use share time to talk about how children are putting words and pictures into their books. So making those decisions, being the owner, like being the driver in the driver's seat of our learning, of our writing. A huge big idea is making books as a process that happens over time. And I bring that up all the time with students. This is, you know, writing is happens over multiple days. Writing happens. I'm coming back to that poem that I was writing and adding a little bit more to it today because something else inspired me. And I want to add that detail into my poem and make it even better. Asking children what they plan to do next in their books. As a whole class, inviting students to think about what else they might do, what other people might do in their book, giving suggestions, noticing what decisions other children in the class are making. And then really looking for those children that are going back into their books and using some suggestions so that we can say, oh, did you notice that Marla went back into her book after she had a suggestion um, from Diane about what could be make her book even better in this case? A line or an invitation that I often use with children to give them that little nudge forward is I think you're ready for. I like that in when I'm conferring with students, I think that it's a really invitational way for to invite students forward to try something different, take a little bit of a risk, but it's not saying the language like you should or your next step is. it's invitational. I think you're ready for. I think if I was learning a new skill, like last summer, I started to take some golf lessons, and I want to feel like, oh, I'm ready for the next step. I'm ready for this. Now I can't wait to get to it, rather than someone telling me, oh, you should really swing like this, or you need to hold your hands like this. So, different way to think about it. That might be helpful as you're working with your kiddos. Okay, and then having some choice of genre is really engaging as well. So sometimes we ask our students, what is your favorite topic to write about? I love to write about my cats. I have picked up on that already this afternoon. But I could have a think aloud, model a think aloud with my students and say, I love to write about my cat, but I could write in a lot of different genres about my cat. I could write a small moment story like I've just told you, but I could also write a poem about cats. I could have a labeled diagram of a cat. I could write a how-to book about taking care of cats. I could write an information book about cats. So I can, even if that's my favorite topic to write about, I can write in so many different ways. And I'm going to choose what one I'm really interested in writing about today and exploring. Okay, something I just wanted to highlight right before at the end of our workshop today is that if you are thinking about teaching like something very specific, either a craft or a process, and this is out of Craft and Process Studies by Matt Glover. Um, you could think of a craft as in, you know, um, an illustration study or punctuation, as I mentioned earlier, an author study, but you could also focus on process some of the time too. Things like planning and revision and reading like a writer. So there's lots of, we could focus in on a craft really specifically, and we can also focus in on a process. And we can do a variety of those based on the needs of our children and what they're interested in. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Many of you have talked about bookmaking and small moment stories. So thank you very much. What about students who say they don't have anything to write about? What, how I've handled that? You're not alone. Absolutely. There are students out there that every class I think has students that say they don't have anything to write about. I tell them they can borrow my story. If they don't have anything to write about, they can write mine or their friends. So hopefully they have some, it's a little bit of a nudge to write down something. And then when they come up with their own story, they can start their own idea later on. But I get a lot of stories about Pix and Paprika and Porto, my three cats. Okay, here are the sources that I used to build this workshop for you today. If there's anything interesting there, check it out. Um, I would I generally start with 6 pages for grade 1 and up, and I would start with 4 pages for kindergarten. If that's helpful. Here is my contact info. If you try out anything and you want to share or ask questions or anything, please let me know. I'd love to hear. I love hearing back from teachers to see how things are going in the classroom. And I'm going to leave you with a short video that hopefully leads you into a beautiful long weekend of honoring yourself and your family.